throughout my whole creative journey, I've always been interested in using it as a platform to talk about topics that I'm passionate about. One job that I did last year, and this was my first big job that I got, and it was with BT Sport, and it was for the Women Action Awards, and that was creating promotional material to sort of advertise the female nominees. And that was sort of like a big step in my career in terms of the fact that I was basically being able to represent women in sport. And I felt so like empowered to kind of use my artwork as a platform to sort of explore that topic.
Hello and welcome to the Blue Moggy Podcast. I am your host, Rachel Stevens. I am a writer, director, producer, and all-around filmmaker, really. And I use this show to talk to other filmmakers and writers and illustrators and composers and other people working within film and media and creative and visual arts to talk about how they've got into their career that they've chosen, some behind-the-scenes stories of projects that they're working on. They share tips and advice to you guys listening, and just share stories about the work that they do. On this episode, I was joined by Sally Waite, who is a Southampton-based artist and illustrator and alumni of Falmouth University. Sally works in sort of commercial advertising sector, making illustration artwork, and has recently been signed by agency Rush, which is an agency for illustrators and animators. On this episode today, you'll hear Sally talk about how and why she got into illustration, how the agency signing came about, and share her sort of tips and advice for being a self-employed freelance illustrator. Before we get onto the episode, I just want to do a quick little announcement for the Blue Moggy Podcast, which from this episode on, we're going to try and stick to a regular release schedule of every other Wednesday, which in the work in between episode 2 and episode 3 that has been sort of setting up more guests in the pipeline to make that more of a reality, to be able to deliver those episodes more regularly. So going forward, at least for the time being, expect episodes every other Wednesday, and in fact the episode number 4 has actually been recorded. So you'll hear that in 2 weeks from this episode being released. Coming up on the Blue Moggy Podcast, you'll hear me speak to Athena Mandis, who is a writer and director, and a bit later in the month, I'll be talking to some film and TV composers and musicians. So make sure you're following and subscribing to the podcast wherever you're listening to it, so that you can be notified when those episodes come out. This podcast is produced by Blue Moggy Media, which is a film and media company still very much in its infancy, so we're still sort of setting the groundwork for the things that we want to do and plan to do. But within the next year, you'll see some short films produced under Blue Moggy Media. There's a photography project that should be getting under the way in the next couple of months, so make sure you're following Blue Moggy Media on social media for those updates when there are announcements to be made about those. This particular episode of the podcast was recorded at City Eye in Southampton. If you are in Southampton or within sort of close range of the area, then definitely make sure you check out City Eye. They are a community filmmaking company, and they do lots of great work. They have lots of resources and events and networking and workshops and support. So yes, we're very happy to have been able to record this episode there at their facilities, and a huge thank you to them for allowing us to do that. But that's about everything you needed to cover for the intro, so it's time to let the Blue Moggy theme music play and the episode start rolling. Hello and welcome back to the Blue Moggy Podcast. My name is Rachel Stevens, and I am here with artist and illustrator Sally Waite.
Hello.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. So I also just want to quickly shout out City Eye, because we are very excited to be sat here in City Eye's new kitted out sound booth. And we've actually got Aaron from City Eye Aaron is sort of overseeing us and doing the technician side of things for today. So before we get into it, Sally, do you just want to do a little like who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I am an illustrator. I predominantly do work in the advertising sector, a lot of campaigns on social topics. I like using sort of illustration as a tool for social change. So I do a lot of things on like feminist topics, sustainability, body positivity, that kind of thing. All digital artwork now. And yeah.
Brilliant. And how I know you went to Falmouth University, didn't you? But
yeah.
where did the sort of journey actually start for you?
So I've always been a very creative person, but I actually was always on the fine art track. That's where I always thought I'd end up doing at uni.
Okay.
And I actually switched course. So right at the last minute, I switched course to illustration. And I think that was because I thought that it would be more of, I'd have more of a voice in illustration and maybe a bit more of a platform to sort of like try and get out the messages I'm trying to send out there, which, like I said, is to do with like social change and things like that. And prior to uni, I studied the foundation art diploma at college, and that was sort of where I kind of was very much like developing my practice. But that all changed when I went to uni because I just decided to like take a bit of a leap and go into more the digital route. I also feel like that's where the world's going now. So for me, I'm not saying that it's traditional art is gorgeous, and I always love doing that, and I still do that some from time to time. But for me, I thought like that's kind of the route I wanted to go down. And I just felt like that was more maybe a platform sort of thing.
Okay, so you always doing creative art things. It was just into uni, sort of became more focused into illustration,
digital and illustration.
Yeah. Okay, and do you so you get commissioned to make work, and you make your own art? Is that right?
I would say it's at the moment. It's very like, so I actually have a part-time job in a design job for a company called Grace and Green, where I do a lot of like graphic design for them. So that's like one of the main things that I'm doing at the moment, and that's sort of like a sustainable period care brand. So a lot of my work is focused on like sustainability and shining light on topics like period poverty and things like that at the moment. But then I also do a few freelance jobs here and there, and hopefully more now that I've got the agency signing last week. But I've done quite a lot of work for breweries, which seemed like the right route to go down since we worked at Steventown together.
Outside of podcast world, Sally and I used to work behind a bar together.
So I've done a few, which felt really full circle to come back and actually get some work in the design world with like craft beer. That's really fun.
I actually, before I was working at the pub, I did a advert for this independent craft beer, and like I just came in as like the production assistant, and I ended up being like an extra in it, and like, but the extra in it, I was behind the bar.
Oh nice.
And I hadn't
you
worked
had lots
in a
of
bar.
practice doing
exactly. So it is weird how like
things got around. It's nice as well because it was actually a Cornish brand that I did the work for.
And you were at uni in Cornwall at the time.
No, this was like the summer after I finished uni. So it was just quite nice because it felt like quite close to like personal in a way. It was quite a really nice project to work on.
And are there any particular like influences or inspirations in your work?
Yeah, I mean, it changes all the time. I would say like I've always been influenced by strong and powerful women. So a lot of the time I'm like, if I think of like artistic influences, I think like Frida Kahlo mainly. Just like I've always been a fan since I was like a kid. So that sort of thing. But then also now I would say like a lot of my the way my style has developed, I would say a lot of it has been influenced by things that I've seen on Instagram and just trends and animation. I love animation, so just like constantly seeing new things. And I think that's like how a lot of artists go. They see trends on Instagram and then it just slowly develops over time. And I think there's like a nice community online now where I've always on Instagram now because I'm always following like new people and trying to see like maybe I don't know
How much so you're working with a client, how much can you put your own influences, inspiration, or are they coming to you being like, we like these, we just want you to do that? Or are you saying, no, this is
I see what you're saying.
my style, I want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if a client's coming to me, they're coming for my style, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's right to, personally, I don't think it's fair to take on someone else's style for a specific role.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't take the job if it was, I personally now, I wouldn't do that. Because I only want to do work that's like, that I enjoy doing and that I like feel like in my style and works for me, if that makes sense.
And so with your part-time graphic design role, did your style kind of fit that company and that's why you ended it up? Or have you sort of did they have much of a set brand before you've had to adapt to?
It was a nice kind of story how I got into it, because I came out of uni looking for work and I'm thinking like, I've got to get myself into the art world. It's hard, you know. I came across this company and they were looking for a different role. It was like sourcing artists to do things like editorials for their blogs, packaging design. So it would be more like me going out like sourcing images and sourcing people to sort of do the work. But then I kind of came to them and said, I really like your company. I really like appreciate what you stand for. But also I am an artist. So if I could like maybe have the opportunity to, and I think that's really important to like actually go for it and ask the questions and say like, they basically made the role for me because they didn't have that original job. The job was different, you know. And I had like a trial sort of thing where I like made some work for them and then they ended up taking me on from there. But I love it. Absolutely love it. It just feels like I'm really passionate about it as well. So I
think that with anything like that helps so much.
Yeah, because I think like especially with like brands and stuff and advertising, you have to be careful that your morals kind of line up. Like I wouldn't work for a brand that say was like really, really badly like not sustainable at all. Like I feel like now I would try and kind of line up. Just, I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, like, as you said at the start, like the social issues, that's obviously a huge part of what you do. So that makes sense that you're looking for companies or collaborations that align with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So speaking of social issues that are important to you, you mentioned when we talk about the podcast, recording this podcast, that you use your art as a feminist tool. So I was just wondering if you could explain a bit about that.
Yeah, so I think that like that's always something that's just motivated me all throughout my whole creative journey. I've always been interested in using it as a platform to talk about topics that I'm passionate about. One job that I did last year, and this was my first big job that I got, and it was with BT Sport, and it was for the Women Action Awards, and that was creating promotional material to sort of advertise the female nominees. And that was sort of like a big step in my career in terms of the fact that I was basically being able to represent women in sport. And I felt so like empowered to kind of use my artwork as a platform to sort of explore that topic. And I don't follow sport really like intensely or anything, but just that being involved in those communities to like empower women and people to
just representation.
Like representation. And I think it's really important, like for people growing up, they want to see themselves in artwork, and you want to be able to see yourself in areas that you're interested in, like in sport, you'd want to see women in weightlifting or women in cycling. You want to see that. So it's really exciting projects like that. That's what sets me on fire. That's what gets me going in terms of my work. So I just feel like, I've always gravitated towards those themes. And then, with the Grace and Green work, again, that's another topic that I'm quite passionate about in terms of like sustainability and tackling period poverty and period accessibility. And that just feels very full circle as well, because I get to do that for a living,
really, it's really important, like artists, that yes, we make things that can just entertain, and that's just as valuable, but like if you have a voice, or if you have a platform to use your voice, like,
exactly,
you may as well use it for the things that you believe in. I to speak of periods, I remember a few years ago seeing a brief for people to make short films around periods, and just completely about like breaking the stigma, and that took me to do a bit of research, and it was just crazy to see that. I think in the last couple of years it's definitely changed. But it's really cool that you like committed to showing your values in your work, and you won't work with brands that like don't meet that.
Definitely.
That's really cool. Let's get a little bit technical, if that's all right.
Yeah,
because what I really want to know is, like, so say a brand's come to you and they want you to make some artwork. Is it all digital? You said that you do
pretty much now. I would say.
And it's still images, it's not videos, or do you do a bit of animation or videos?
No, it's something I want to get into actually, but at the moment it's just pictures at the moment. Images.
So say someone comes to you as like, Sally, here's some money, I want you to make this. What's your next step, or what's your first step?
To just talk a bit about my process. I will receive a brief, and the main thing is to understand exactly what the client's trying to get out of you. Like, you want to make sure you completely understand the brief, you've read through it, and researching things like you want to research for reference imagery, you want to research the topic, just make sure you fully understand what you're doing first. And then it's going to town on sketching. And I sketch digitally now, even sketching now.
So you're not pen and paper? Unless
maybe if I'm out and about, I might take a sketchbook with me, but I do tend to sit with my iPad now and I sketch on that. It feels so similar because you use a pen. But it's crazy to me. I wouldn't think a few years ago, I wouldn't have thought that I'd be doing that. I'll be doing lots of sketching, and then it's sort of coming up with those rough ideas you'd present to the client. And then they'll come back with feedback, and then it might be a bit of back and forth to get the right idea, and then you can go to town on the colour and everything.
And are you creating this all on an iPad with a pen? Or?
I do mine on my iPad with a pen, all the sketching and stuff, and then actually putting the image together. I use a bit of it's called Procreate, the app that I use on my iPad. Okay. I use a little bit of that, but I mainly upload everything to Photoshop and fiddle about with it on there, because it's just on a bigger screen, and it's a lot better in terms of like resolution and stuff to try and get everything to size. And
are they two apps that like work with each other, or are you sort of exporting from?
I'll export, because Photoshop's Adobe. Okay. Procreate's just not. It's not really like, you're not really supposed to use it in the creative world, but I just find it a lot easier to use, because it's just nice to actually have like a pen that you're drawing with on. I know it's digital still, but it still feels a bit nicer to actually sit with like a pad and a pen. But you can export as like stickers and then put it all together, kind of like a collage. You put it all together on Photoshop, and you can adjust the colour and everything like that. So that's how I would tend to get from the initial brief to a final. And then it's like, sometimes there might be some things that you need to switch up if the client's. It's all about open communication. You just want to be checking in and like check that how they feel about this idea. But I would always say like, I always stick if I'm doing with sketching and they've got a very clear idea of what they want, I always stick a wild card in there, because sometimes they won't know. Sometimes they'll see something else.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh, actually, that's a much better idea. Because if they have a very, very specific, clear view of what they want, they might need like to open their eyes a bit more. And as an artist, you can show them that, because they won't know necessarily if, you know, there's other ideas you could show them. So I always try and like stick a little wild card in there.
So you're pitching a few ideas
Yeah,
at a time, and then they'll say,
it is a bit like a pitch in a
or,
sense. Yeah.
Or we like that part of that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And they'll come back to you. Is there a lot of more touching up to finalise it, or do they keep coming back and they're like, oh, and now that that line needs to be there, or that, or we need this in this format, and actually we forgot about that, or is it
not necessarily? Because normally you do all of that discussion before you added colour.
Yeah.
Because when you start, or you'd do a colour example where you've just done quick like colouring in, like just very, very quick, just to show them what it will probably end up looking like. But you kind of want to keep that discussion before you actually go in on the colour, because that's what takes the longest. Mm-hmm. And then once you've done all of that, if they want it changed, it's a little bit more tricky. But yeah, so normally it'll be between the sketching and the final stage.
I think I might be a bit too traumatised with editing. Clients just coming back and oh yeah, that's really good. And then this. Yeah. And then that. And then that. Yeah. And then that. And then you're like that. Now I'm on like draft 35. Yeah. It's still not finalised. Yeah. You can see a sort of smile from Aaron in agreement. So one thing actually I wanted to talk about, so I know like from my point of view as a filmmaker, there's a fair amount of like community of other filmmakers in the area, and illustration, that seems like something that's more solo. Is there a community, or is it all you mentioned an online community on Instagram? It's
tricky now because like I work from home, and I would say I felt much more of a community when I was at uni. And I think it's very important to like get involved with the studio groups and like make sure you're like, because it's so nice to have people around you that are also creative. But I would say now I do work much more on my own, because everything's online nowadays. But me and my uni friends, we still keep in contact, and every now and again we'll send something through to the group chat and we'll be like, guys, I need desperate help. Like we can't talk to our tutors anymore. So, you know, sure. It's like, please help us.
So you've still got that sort of peer support.
But there's definitely options now. I mean, you can hire out studio spaces, like illustrators can do that. And there's a lot of collaborative groups now. So you can make a group with your friends and do collaborative projects if that's something you would be interested in. But for me, I just tend to work quite solo at the moment. But that could change, you know. But yeah.
And so are you like, you're working like in your room, no sound? Do you have music in the background? For me, I can't work in silence. I've learned that about myself recently.
Depends how stressed I am.
Okay.
If I'm really, really stressed, it has to be silent. If I've got a deadline and I'm like, I've got an hour or something, I'm like, absolute silence. But no, most of the time I listen to podcasts now.
Okay.
I have a podcast on, or I have a bit of music on. Sometimes I'll have a sitcom on in the background, because it's something you don't have to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certain things I can have on if the TV's on. There's certain things I can have on with TV if I'm working, and then there's certain things that are just too distracting.
Yeah.
So you've briefly mentioned that you were signed by an agency last week.
Yeah.
Agency Rush. Do you want to talk about how that came about?
Yeah. So after I finished uni, I had in my mind that I wanted an agent. It's not for everyone, because they do a lot of work for you. They take a lot of work off your hands. To me, it's really positive because I really wanted an agent, but for some people, it doesn't work out for them. So I was contacting agents, trying to get my work out there. I didn't really get anything back, and I just thought, because a lot of the time agents don't really take on graduates, because they want someone who's got a much more developed portfolio maybe, or someone who's been in the industry for a longer period of time. So I sort of put that aside. But funnily enough, a few months down the line, they found me on Instagram, and that's how it came about. And they messaged me and said, we'd love to set up a chat. And it was a bit back and forth for a few months. And then finally last week the launch came out, and I was able to finally talk about it for real, which was really nice. So yeah.
And so you said that they take a lot of the work off your hands. So what work are they doing on your behalf?
So it's mostly dealing with the clients, because obviously this happened last week. I can't go super into depth because I don't know. I haven't like experienced getting a job through them yet. But it will be a lot of they sort of deal with the client for you. There's not you won't necessarily have to speak to the client because the client will go through the agent. They're also marketing you. They're trying to find you work. All the legal stuff, they do that for me. All the pricing, they'll do that for me, which is great because I find that so difficult.
So all the sort of like admin side.
All the admin side,
So you just make
all you're doing is the creative stuff, and hopefully for the most amount of money at the least amount of time, if that makes sense.
And how does that work? So you are self-employed. So can you still find, if someone else came up to you outside of the agency, can you still take on that work, or do you have to go through the agency?
I can. But the way the agency works is we sort of view it as more of a partnership, in the sense that if that happened, it would be nice if I could just have open communication with the agents. And also at the end of the day, they're there to help you, so they're going to try and get you the best deal. So it would make more sense to pass clients that contact me to just pass them straight on to my agent now, which is really nice to say.
Yeah. That would be nice to say.
Yeah.
Talk to my agent.
Talk to my agent.
Yeah. So is there anything else that, other than taking that work off your hands, is there another reason you were actively looking for an agency?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier about the community side of things, me working from home all the time, it's quite difficult to network. And with an agent, I felt like may suit the way I work better, because they're able to talk to, like, get those clients, and like they have lots of contacts. And especially because I'm interested in advertising illustration and doing like these social media campaigns and things like that. Advertising illustration is probably one of the hardest areas to get into, because it's all networking.
Right.
And it's all basically about who you know.
Yeah,
and it's really hard. It's it's really hard, isn't it? You know. Yeah.
And are they, so Agency Rush, I was looking at them a little bit, they're an international company, aren't they? So they're based in the UK, but they're also, was it the US?
Yes, yeah. I think it's only New Zealand and Australia they don't cover.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're just for illustrators?
They have an animation side as well. And that's all in-house, which is really exciting, because hopefully at some point I'll be able to work on a collaborative animation project or something like that. So it'd be good. They also do like stuff with the artists together, and they have done in the past. So I'm hoping that
like a project together.
Again with the community thing that I was saying earlier. Yeah. Hopefully in the future it'll be quite nice to get involved and hopefully meet other artists as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to talk to you about, being self-employed. So how do you stay motivated to do the work, or like find the work when there isn't work? Can you talk about any sort of tips for self-employed people out there?
That's a tricky one. I would say, like, I'm sticking to topics when I'm doing my own work, my own personal work. I'm sticking to topics I'm passionate about. So, and that really keeps me motivated, because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And that's why I try and like tend to stick to the same sort of similar topics, because that's what gets me going, and that's how I guess I would stay motivated. Also, it is hard, but sometimes if you set yourself deadlines, then it gets you into the flow a bit more, because you're like, I want to finish this by tomorrow or something like that, or by the end of the week. And also it's quite nice to I always do like little things for my friends. Like I'll do like prints for my friends' birthdays or something like that, and it's just those little things when you're taking time to do, because doing creative work, I'm doing it because I'm passionate about it. I'm doing it because I enjoy it. It was first my hobby, so I feel like when you're finding like getting wrapped up in the fact that it's your job, sometimes just taking a step back and doing something for fun again is quite nice. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I like doing like the DV mission that I talked about in the first episode with Ben. It's a 48-hour film challenge.
Yeah.
It's not something you go into to make like this incredible film that's going to win all these awards. You make it because it's fun to do, challenge yourself and to get your friends together, and it's chaotic because you've got 48 hours, but it's fun. I guess it's sort of time scale wise, that's dependent on the project, whether there is a time scale or whether they're just like when you can. So then setting yourself those deadlines is probably quite helpful.
Yeah, I think, well, things for print, for example, editorials, the turnovers are so quick. Sometimes they could be like 12 hours. Okay. You've got 12 hours. Yeah. Because it needs to go to print the next day and they're desperate for an illustrator. But then things like social media campaigns, or it might be up to a month, maybe more, bigger projects like that. I prefer working on them because I'm not good under time pressure, really. Right. So yeah, it depends on what you're doing. Yeah.
And so obviously, hopefully, it'll be different having the agency. But before that, how were you getting quite a lot of work, or were you like doing a lot of prep, trying to find the work?
It was here and there. I'd say the only work I've ever gotten has been through social media. And sometimes that's hard because I think it's hard to stay active online. It really is. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to like always be showing yourself as like a certain thing online. You want to look positive and always like putting yourself out there and being consistent with it. But to be honest, that's like been a huge kind of launch for my journey into a career, because that's how I've managed to find clients, contact people. And people have contacted me through things like Instagram, Twitter, because you're putting your work out there and that's how they're seeing it. Yeah. And it's all online these days. Mm-hmm.
And we sort of talked about a few projects you've done. Was there any particular pieces you wanted to talk about? I was going through your Instagram feed earlier, and the Cornish Scream one does stand out. Yeah. I liked that one, but there was a few other ones I liked. I can't remember what it was, but there's a woman, it's like all green, and the woman's like quite like taking up quite a lot of the frame. Do you know which piece I'm talking about?
So that was an endometriosis piece, which I actually suffer from endometriosis, so it's quite a personal piece, but I actually did that prior to getting the role for Grace and Green as sort of part of my trial sort of thing. Although it was also personal because I felt like a connection to it. Yeah. Which is probably why that piece ended up coming out the way it did. Like, I really love, that's one of my favourites that I've done. Yeah. Because I'm putting my own passion into there. But yeah, that was a personal project. Yeah.
And I'm just trying to think what else I saw on there. I know you've done a lot of like horoscope. Was that a project you just did to yourself to keep busy, or was that?
That was in lockdown. I started that, and that was like I was trying to create different pieces on different body types and trying to like represent all different types of people. And I think doing it for the like star signs, that's like a good
nice sort of theme.
It's a nice theme to stick to because it's like there's so much imagery there. You think like Sagittarius, you've got the arrow and the bow, and like they all have themes, so it's nice to like switch it up for each one.
Yeah, so like sort of what would be the word? Personification. Personification of the
that was more of like
signs.
Quite a fun project, but also trying to keep it like quite body positive and
Going back to like tips for being self-employed, how did you find, or how do you find managing like how much to charge? Yeah, is that case by case, or are you quite strict? Like, this is my budget, or
that is quite a tricky one. However, I would say most of the time when I'm trying to work out how much something is going to cost, I normally ask a budget. I normally ask them what their budget is first and work out how much time I'm willing to spend for what their budget is, and then what the end result of that is going to be. So it's more of a conversation about how much do I want to do this job for / how much is their budget. But it's hard to say. It's really, really hard to say. And there's also calculators online you can use to work out how much. But the AOI, the Association of Illustrators, they have a really good calculator online where you can work out how much you should be getting paid for a job. So that's really good. But I wouldn't be able to say a specific price because they're all the projects are always different. They always take you a different amount of time. But you have to think time and how much their budget is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if something's like, we need this in 12 hours, that's maybe not going to be paying you as much as something like a big social media campaign that's going to take you months.
Not necessarily, because if it's one day job, you might charge a bit more because it's only one day and the rush and the deadline. But if it's a bit long, say it's like you've got a certain amount for this one day, you wouldn't then charge that every single day for a month if you're working on a project for a month, because no one's going to spend that much. It's going to work out a lot. So obviously on the whole, the bigger job would cost more, but if you break it down, maybe the smaller job would actually pay more per hour. Yeah. Because it's so short and quick, and you've got to get it turned over so quickly. Yeah. Also, it depends who it's for. If you're working for a big brand, they might have a lot more money to spend on the project, you know. So.
But there are guides out there for how much illustrators should be charging. Yeah. That's good to know. For me, it is completely case by case, I think. Like, it depends who's asking, it depends when they're asking, like what else am I doing? Not just what other work am I doing, but like if I'm going to be spending time on a project, is it worth it? Yeah. Or like if it's something I want to do and I've not got much else on, then I'll probably would accept it for a bit cheaper. Yeah. But if I'm like, I don't see much value in this other than getting paid, then give me more. But I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the side where I've been asking for money, but I've also been on the side where I'm trying to get people to work on my stuff. Yeah. And I don't necessarily have any money. Yeah. So that's always it's a hard one to manage. But I think as long as you're like upfront about whatever your money situation is, like it's really low budget or it's no budget. Yeah. Or
it's just having that conversation, because most of the time, if it's a project I really want to work on, then I want to be able to adhere to their budget for the project. So I'll work out how much time am I willing to spend on this for that price, basically.
You'd rather work for maybe a slightly less payout at the end than not work waiting for a bigger one? It depends what the project,
and like you said, it depends what else you've got on at the time. Because sometimes you're going to have to decide if you're actually going to be able to fit it in. If you need to be able to like manage, because you might illustration jobs honestly come like buses. Like 1 minute you'll have nothing, and the next minute you'll have like loads of jobs to do in 1 week. So sometimes you might need to choose, and then sometimes that's down to like maybe what's going to pay more if you want to go down that route, or maybe it's more about, I just really, really want to work on this job, and I'm going to adhere to their budget, for example. So yeah, I would say mine's more on case by case as well. But I try and like just fit to. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you ever get like a friend of a friend try and cheeky, could you do this?
Haven't we all? Yeah. I went on, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I went on a date with a guy who wanted a tattoo design. And he just went, it was like
a first date?
Yeah, it was like we went on a first date, and he messaged me like the next day being like, I like your designs, I might get a tattoo tomorrow, do you want to design it? No, absolutely not. One date.
Yeah. Was the date good until then, or were you? No. That's a no.
If it's not a yes, it's a no.
Yeah, that is cheeky. Yeah, I've had a few. One thing a filmmaker, Anthony Batchelor, who I used to work with at City Eye a long time ago, said to me when I was first starting out was, don't do friends' weddings. Because once you do one, everyone's going to ask you to do it. And I've actually done 2 weddings, as in I've been the photographer for them. Neither I was exactly keen on doing it. One, I was like, okay, I'll do it because I didn't really know anyone else that was going to the wedding, so it gave me something to do. And the other one, it was my dad's wedding, and the day before he was like, so we don't have a photographer. And I was like, oh. Okay.
That'll be me then.
Yeah, exactly. But I wouldn't like ever advertise myself as a wedding photographer because I'm not one.
Yeah.
And there's a reason they charge the money they do.
Yeah.
And that's the thing as well.
It's similar with like illustration. Like I used, when I first started out doing like when I was in college, I was trying to explore like as much as I could of what career I wanted to go down. So I did a bit of tattoo design, I did a bit of this, that, whatever. But I really try and steer away from that now. But I still get people asking me if I can design a tattoo for them. But it's just not what I do anymore. Yeah. And it's a really good route to go down. Some of my friends from uni, they've gone down that route. But it's so, for me, it's just not what I want to do anymore. But because I did one, someone else finds out and they want one, and someone else, so it's very much like that, in the same way.
I didn't realise with the tattoo thing, I just assumed it was the tattoo artists that design.
Not always, because sometimes people want like a specific style.
I don't know, I've got two tattoos. One I drew myself and just literally on the back of an envelope and went in and was like, can you tattoo this on me, please? Yeah. And my first one, which is the stars, I want 2 stars. Nice. And then, and they just like, I don't even know what it was, paint or something. They just put 2 stars on the screen. I went, that. But my clapperboard, which is on my ankle, I drew that. So we've talked a little bit about the work you've already done. Is there like a dream project for you or a dream company to work for?
I would love to do an animation collaboration, which I've said before. I don't have like specific brands that I'm really like keen to work with necessarily, but I'd love to do like a big campaign on something similar to the BT Sport job that I was talking about earlier. I'd love to keep that going, that kind of thing. Like that's sort of where my favourite.
So something like that'll be on the side of buses.
Oh, I'd love that. Or do you know what? I'd love to do like a big mural. Okay. Like, have you seen the ones in Glasgow? They have like huge murals all over the city. I'd love to do something like that.
That'd be cool.
That would be cool.
just
got a
giant
dream big.
Green woman on the side of the building. Do you have any tips for, say someone's listening and they want to get into illustration, especially like the advertising side of it? Do you have any tips for how to go about that? Is uni the way to go, or is it one of those things where it doesn't matter how you get into it?
I wouldn't necessarily say university isn't accessible for everyone, so I wouldn't say that you would have to go to uni to still get into the creative world. My main bit of advice would be you attract what you're putting out there. So if you're putting work out there for a certain thing, for example, when I started getting some more work in the BT Sport, the Cornwall Brewery, that's because I was doing my own personal projects that kind of was leading towards that side of illustration. So putting those kind of things in my portfolio meant that when those clients would look at my portfolio, they could see maybe their company in my work or something like that. So if you have a certain area of illustration that you want to go into, build your portfolio towards that area, I would say. Yeah.
Any other tips that you can think of? Because I'm asking because like it's something I kind of know from an outsider's perspective. So I don't know what it's like to work as an illustrator. So I don't know like the day-to-day.
I would say like in terms of developing your work into a certain style. Just have fun with it, like you want to enjoy it. So just like always it being like when you're going through your sort of creative process, you want to like just have fun and play around, because that's when the best work sort of comes out, I would say. And when you don't have to have like a really strong style when you're starting out. That will come with time. And just being like consistent with your like motivation to like make work, because you just got to be constantly making. It's not always going to be amazing and good, but if you're making something, then that's something, you know.
Yeah. Do you have to be good at drawing to be an illustrator? Because
you have to have a passion for drawing.
Okay.
I would say you don't have to be like really good with like proportions, because it's not about that. A lot of illustrators, the body proportions, you're deliberately changing the body proportions to make it more interesting. Like I was awful at life drawing, absolutely awful. I could just never get it accurate. But you want to have a passion for it, so that you can like be constantly doing it, so you can develop it into if that's what you want to do, you want to be able to.
I was actually thinking, looking at the Cornish Scream one that you did earlier, I was like, the sort of silhouette of the woman, if you like, sort of reminded me of like Kim Possible or like things like that, like in terms of like the body shape. I don't know. If it's that wasn't, it probably wasn't an influence, but like
when I was like, one of the exercises we did in uni when it was like the first year was like playing around with body proportions, and that's quite a fun thing to do, because you're just like drawing like someone's head really really big or someone's legs really really long, and that's quite fun. And then over time, if you're like keep practicing, and you'll eventually come up with this sort of style that fits what you want to do, and you'll you just got to experiment, honestly.
Hello, this is editing Rachel just jumping in for a second. Because at this point in the recording, Aaron from City Eye, who was in the sound booth, actually asked a question to Sally, but we weren't set up to record Aaron's audio of that question, and we forgot to capture that in the moment. So I'm just jumping in to repeat the question as best I remember it, and then I will continue the episode with Sally's answer. The question was, what is your approach to colour as an illustrator? Do you have to have an understanding of what colours represent and symbolise, and do you have to stick to those? For example, with film, with colour grading in the edit of a film, that's quite a big storytelling device that's used, is the colours on screen will represent or symbolise something different for where we are in the story or the characters that are on screen. Is that something that you have to have an understanding of to be able to use within your illustration?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the illustrator, because like for me, colour is really important in my work. But I know illustrators that don't really use colour at all, or they have like a very limited colour palette and they use the same colour palette for every bit of work they create. But for me, I absolutely love playing with colour, and I think like it can change the whole mood of a piece. So say, for example, you're doing something that's supposed to be quite like joyful. I always think, well, I want to use like quite bright colours here, as opposed to maybe it's like more of a duller tone. It would be like connotations of it being more like sad, or
Going back to illustration tips, you actually gave me one for Blue Moggy Media.
Oh yeah.
So I knew with Blue Moggy Media that I wanted to do this logo influenced by a cross stitch.
Yeah.
That I did, and I was going down a more pixelated route, and it was really complicated. And just you were the other side of the bar, and you said to me, whatever you do, make sure it can work in black and white.
Yeah, that's one thing I actually learned at uni with branding and stuff, and like logos especially. You want it to work as like a black and white icon or text as well, especially if it's like printed at the bottom of emails or anything like that. You don't want it has to work as like a silhouette sort of thing.
Yes, and that
essentially.
really helped me. That made me go back to this complicated, pixelated thing with all these different colours in it and go, actually, I need to simplify this.
Yeah.
And so I ended up more with just the silhouette, which I can then have it as black or blue or
and it's
white.
good as well because you've got the text, you've got the icon, you can separate those, you can keep them together, you can put it in black and white, you can like that's the perfect kind of logo because you want it to be versatile like that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that because that was really helpful.
You
should. I don't know if I ever showed you the one I was doing before, but now I look at it, I'm like, that was never going to work.
Good advice when I'm the other side of the bar, you know. A few drinks down, I'm giving out free illustration advice.
Maybe that's what we should have been doing. Recording this in the bar.
A few
I do. I remember that, and that was really helpful for me getting the design to where it is.
I think also like when you're making something, sometimes you do just have to take a step back and like look at it from maybe someone else's perspective. That's why working in a community is like can be really, really useful because like especially when you've been looking at your own work for too long. I don't know if you feel the same about film.
Definitely, yeah.
But it's like sometimes you can't tell if it's good or not anymore because you're like your brain's like all scrambled because you're just staring at it for way too long. Sometimes you do just have to take a step back and get someone else's opinion or whatever.
I don't like to edit my own films for that reason because you need that outside perspective. Like I can edit and I'll edit other things, but I'm not going to edit something I've written and directed. Because you need
a second eye sometimes. Definitely.
I also like to, once I've written a draft of something, I like to try and leave it for at least a week, if not longer, just so the next time I reread it I'm a bit fresher and can kind of go back to it. Or that might be the period where I'm like sending it to some people that I've worked with and that I know are going to give me honest feedback.
I think there is like some downsides to working a creative career because sometimes you're not always going to be able to like be in the flow. And sometimes you do need to take like a few days to like step away from a project, and that's really hard because then you're questioning whether or not you're like doing well. And I think like it's just important to remember that like you are doing well. Like it's all going to be fine. And sometimes you're going to have less creative days than other days.
I can't remember what the quote's from, but it came up. It came up last week, I think, actually, after the City Eye Network, where someone who's a composer said, when inspiration strikes, it better find you working. So it's just about, if you are doing something creative, about regularly working, not waiting until you're inspired, because inspiration will happen while you're working. And I think that's something I've definitely learned over the last 12-ish years I've been doing it, is there are things that motivate me and inspire me more, and there are ways I know where I can be more productive, so I just need to, if I know I need to write, then I have to sort of
and a lot of probably in the film industry and in illustration industry, a lot of it is about problem solving, and that's just something that you get used to. Like I'm still not even, I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I completely know what I'm doing, because I'm still quite near to the beginning of my creative journey. And I think that's like a very big part of it, like working out how you're going to solve this problem, how you're going to get around this, blah, 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 that sort of thing.
I've said it so many times in film education projects that I've done in the past, where it's like, just start writing. It doesn't matter what you're writing, but it's getting into the process and the rhythm of writing. And like, even if what you're writing is, I used to say this all the time, like, even if what you're writing is Rachel is making me write something and I don't know what to write yet, and like you're just getting that, your pen and paper, or if you're on a keyboard, getting getting the movement going, that will like trigger something, and then suddenly you are actually writing something. That's
it's the same with sketching. Just sketch.
And a first draft is a first draft.
Exactly.
Exactly. A sketch is a sketch. It's not the final piece.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's it. Thank you, Sally, so much for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Aaron, for being our sound technician for today. And thank you to City Eye for letting us come and use your newly kitted out sound booth. It's very exciting. And yeah, that's it. Talk to you next time.
Well, that's almost a wrap for another episode of the podcast. Thank you so much to Sally Waite for being a guest on this one. If you want to follow what Sally's up to or to see her illustration work, you can find her on Instagram at Sal Illustrates. That's SAL Illustrates. Make sure you follow Sally so you can see all the wonderful work that she's doing there. Of course, another thank you to City Eye for letting us use their facilities to record this episode, and for Aaron's help with the technical side of recording. Huge thank you to you for listening. As I mentioned in the intro, going to be trying to stick to a more regular schedule of every other Wednesday from here on out, so make sure you are subscribing or following or liking this episode wherever you are listening to it, and you can find out more about Blue Moggy Media and stay up to date with any announcements that we have by finding us on social media at Blue Moggy Media on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, etc. Or go to bluemoggymedia.com. I'm really looking forward to sharing the next episode with you, which has been recorded. I spoke to Fina Mandis, who's a writer-director. We talked about how she got into film through documentary and short films, and her work as a film lecturer. A couple of short films that she's had successes with at film festivals, so we talked into those. We talked about one film that's being developed as a feature film and sort of how all of that came about. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that episode with you. And then after that, I'll be talking to DL and Chris Wood, who are some film and TV composers and musicians. So looking forward to doing like a bit like we did today, doing like a different angle within film and media and the creative arts. It's not all writers and directors, and that's something that I want to make sure that there is a variety of roles and sectors within this podcast. So if you're listening and there's something you'd like to hear, someone you'd like to hear from, for example, you want to hear from a photographer, or you want to hear from an editor, or you want to hear maybe less practical, maybe you want to hear from someone working in casting, or someone from an agency, or you want to hear from an actor, whatever it is that you would like to hear from, please let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions, not for Fina because that episode's being recorded, but for Chris or DL, for the composers, if you have any music questions or composing questions, then do get in touch, and I will incorporate that into the episode recording. But that's just about everything for today, so the only thing left to do is to press play on the Blue Moggy theme created by Justin Wetherall one more time, and I'll see you later.